everything I've spoken of today has been Guilford County specific, and would not want to imply that North Carolina Friends weren't active in other parts of the state. There's a lot of very interesting work that's been done on how Northeastern North Carolina Friends and Friends in Eastern North Carolina were much more right in the thick of things with stronger, larger plantations in that region. More of the Friends who had that struggle when the edict came down that you can't own slaves anymore were in the eastern part of the state, whereas Friends in this part of the state, in central Piedmont, perhaps had never had those kinds of connections. And so there are a number of court cases and well-documented petitions and things dealing with that challenge of negotiating slavery in eastern North Carolina, really from the 1770s up through the early part of the 19th century, with those challenges of individuals who are not able to manumit slaves or wanting to assist slaves or having neighbors that want to will them slaves because they know the Quakers will be less harsh. And so a very complicated story. But also means that there's even more need for safe haven. And we have glimpses of things, but it's very hard to document. But one case that has been more documented than others, and is documented enough to have received recognition for the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom designation as a site, is Henry and Dorothy Copeland, who were members of Rich Square monthly meeting that still continues as a meeting today. They were definitely active in assisting African Americans in the eastern part of the state. There's also an anecdotal story that speculates that I guess one of the most famous of anti-slavery activists, revolutionaries, John Brown, may have even traveled through that area, and they were known to him as individuals who were sympathetic to the cause of anti-slavery. There are others in that particular Quaker community who we don't have direct ties to know if they were active in the Underground Railroad, but were certainly active in assisting African Americans. There's correspondence between a European American Quaker woman in that area, writing and exchanging fabrics for clothing and so forth with a African American woman in Indiana who had come from northeastern North Carolina, and with this Quaker family's assistance had resettled there. There's more that we could probably learn from that story, but I think that shows some of those continuing connections, both through legal and illegal means. Here is a African American woman in 1820s Indiana who is literate enough to be writing a letter that has spelling and penmanship as good or better than most European American letters of the time, describing her life in Indiana, updating Quakers in North Carolina about the rest of her family, and inquiring about ties and individuals that remained behind in North Carolina. So there were those in other regions of the state beyond Guilford County. There was definitely activities and partnerships going on. I think we know the Guilford County story best because of the prominence of Levi Coffin, and the fact that this was such a central place for activities, and probably a bit more support, and a lot of institutions based here that provided some of that grounding. So it was perhaps a little more known even at the time, whereas some of these cases in other regions of the state were a lot less talked about for very practical reasons during the time. And did not leave behind documentation the same way.